thoughts. There's an individual here, there's a character here. There's what neuroscience is, and philosophers of consciousness are more and more recognizing as a bundle of stuff happening. Not a central self, not an ego, not a person, but a bundle of sensations happening. You know, what is a person? Well, we could answer that question in 1,000 ways, but we might as well say a person is a river. The one thing we can say is a person is a process. A person isn't a thing, it's not an object, it's not an entity. A person is a process, and a river is a process. And in saying this, we may recognize that this is what the Buddhists have been saying for 2,500 years. So there is a bundle of sensations. There's always something happening. In the body, in the mind, in the perceptions, in the emotions. In awareness, there's always something happening. You cannot do nothing. I think, by the way, in a way, that this disputation, so what you're saying is, you don't need to do anything. What it really is an accusation of spiritual laziness. In which case, if it is, I embrace it willingly. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, in this context, or in your first book, you say that spiritual experiences are not, well, I would not say necessary, but it's not so important to have spiritual experiences. But from my point of view, I see all the people who get some kind of enlightenment, they have spiritual experiences before. Right. I've never heard but I've never heard from people who get enlightenment from nothing, you know, from...
I've met them. Now, let's be very careful. I don't want to be really pedantic about language all the way through the afternoon, but I think sometimes it is important, even if it does sound pedantic. So, firstly, from here, there is no one who gets enlightenment. No person has ever got enlightenment. Yeah. But if... I know it can say... Well, it is just words and it isn't. It's in one way it is centrally important, which is why I will go on insisting about being pedantic from here, from this chair, about that kind of language. But however we frame it, you know, if I frame it in my terms and I talk about, let's say, individuals or psychophysical systems or whatever it might be, characters where liberation is seen. Oh yes, I promise you there are plenty of cases where the person's done nothing that you would recognise as spiritual. Absolutely nothing. This is one of the maddening things about this. It seems so unfair. I follow my guru for 30 years. I eat only rice and lentils. I suffer the most appalling illnesses halfway up the Himalayas. And what's more, I've given my guru my wife, my home and my children. And some bugger in a shop in Munich who's never even heard the word spirituality, who's walking up the stairs to the electrical department and suddenly they're not there. And that's all we're talking about. All we're talking about is seeing through the person, is seeing that the person is, if you like, a construct. It's an appearance. It's a kind of pretense, although that's a rather misleading word because no one is doing the pretending. And it seems so unfair. I mean, excuse me, you know, I've had diarrhea in the Himalayas for the last 4 years. This bloke's been, I don't know, reading books, going to the cinema, going to nightclubs, and suddenly he's not there. And that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about anything more complicated than that. That's all liberation consists of. It consists of seeing, well, we can refine this later on this afternoon, but for now let's leave it at that. It simply consists of seeing that there is no person. This is a kind of waking dream. This is a kind of waking dream. So believe me, there are plenty of examples where there has been, and the opposite, there's plenty of examples where there have been years of spiritual experiences experiences, and still the person is there. And it is not seen that the person is just an appearance.
What isn't just an appearance?
That out of which all appearances flow, nothing. Though, quite of course, within the waking dream, everything is.
Just an
But the sense of being a separate person is kind of particularly addictive.
Yes.
You said it's always something happening.
Except in dreamless sleep.
Yeah, but also you being no one, also have this river of sensations and thoughts and feelings. It also happens to you.
Of course. Except it doesn't happen for me, but then actually it doesn't happen for you either. The only difference may be, I mean, I'm not making any assumptions at all, but the only difference is that maybe, here it's seen that it doesn't happen for anyone, and maybe there it's felt that it does. But of course, as long as there isn't dreamless sleep or physical death, then something is always happening. The stream is flowing, we could say. The stream which creates the appearance that there's a person is always flowing.
Because a description of enlightenment is that the thought process stops.
Yes. That is a description of enlightenment, and as with many other descriptions of enlightenment, I will cheerfully throw it in the bin. I will cheerfully throw it in the bin. I mean, the description that enlightenment has something to do with the flow of thought stopping has buggered up thousands of people for many, many years who sit there trying to stop their thoughts, which is an impossibility. Firstly, because you can't stop thoughts. Secondly, because they're not their thoughts. And thirdly, because there's no one there to stop them. But it's a kind of very attractive idea, because for many of us, our thoughts are very disturbing. Yeah? And for many of us, it's our thoughts, precisely our thoughts, that give us a very strong sense of separateness, which is very uncomfortable, and that's what we want to lose. Added to that, we might climb into the Himalayas and find a holy one wearing robes who seems to have far fewer thoughts. So it's natural for the mind. I mean, the mind always operates logically except when it's operating illogically. But in this case, it operates logically. It sees this holy one sitting in the mountains. The holy one seems to have a peace that I lack. And the holy one also seems to have fewer thoughts. So I think, aha, if I can stop my thoughts, then I will have peace. Doesn't work, because what I've just done there is I've mistaken cause for effect. It is true, in some cases, this doesn't have to be the case, but it is true that when liberation is seen, there tends to be some quietening of thoughts. This is partly because when liberation is seen, the energy explosion that is involved in that often takes away some of the neurosis that was there. And neurotic energy is a great generator of thoughts, and particularly a great generator of uncomfortable thoughts. So what we could say, I mean, this is a bit risky to say this, but we could say where liberation is seen, thoughts, and particularly uncomfortable thoughts, are likely to become less. But not the other way round. If I can make my thinking less, then there'll be liberation. And over again in the story of spiritual paths, this mistake is made, this mistake of mistaking cause for effect and effect for cause. Not only is there no need to quieten down your thoughts, you can't quieten down your thoughts because they're not your thoughts. The river of thoughts is flowing. Can I just throw one more thing in as well and then come back to me? And there's some wonderful things going on in psychology at the moment. Wonderful increase in our understanding of consciousness. And one of the things that psychologists have noticed is what they call the rebound effect, which I was talking about yesterday or the day before. And the rebound effect is absolutely wonderful, and we probably all recognise it. The more you try to stop something psychological, the stronger it gets. So the more I try to stop thinking, the stronger thoughts get. One very obvious example of this, which I've already mentioned, is that if you have difficulty sleeping, if you do a technique to help yourself go to sleep, on average, it will take you longer to go to sleep than if you do nothing, because of the rebound effect. Because if you do a technique to help yourself go to sleep, you are focusing on the fact that you can't sleep. In the same way, as I've said before, if I tell you all now not to think of monkeys, what happens? You're immediately thinking of monkeys. And one of the things that this, I think, has most relevance to is the plague. I can only call it a plague. The plague of the positive thinking movement that is spreading out from America like a poisonous miasma. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with positive thinking, of course not. I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, oh, don't think positively. But positive thinking taken, as always happens with American movements, taken to an absurd and ridiculous and exaggerated extreme. And of course, the rebound effect shows us that what happens is the more you try only to have positive thoughts, the more power the negative thoughts have. Haven't you noticed, isn't this, you know, haven't you noticed that when you're around particularly spiritual people, they often, somehow, something about them, you feel,
oh, yes.
why am I getting the impression you're so irritable? Or am I the only person that's ever experienced that? When you're around particularly positive people, you think, there's something really irritable and critical under there. As somebody was coming through the door, we were having this conversation about the shadow, about, you know, about suppression. Well, this is simple shadow psychology. The more energy we put into positive thinking, the more we feed the shadow and the stronger it gets. I can't remember whether it was Jung himself or somebody else that said the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. So this isn't a message, this isn't a teaching, and this isn't advice of any kind whatsoever. But nevertheless, I'm quite happy to sit here and say, you know, if you want to have a reasonably contented life, embrace the shadow. That's got nothing to do with non-duality, it's just simple psychology. The more you try and push the shadow away, which is what positive thinking encourages you to do, the more you try and push the shadow away, the stronger it gets.
And the more you need another positive thinking seminar.
Yes. Another book, which I just happen to have in my case, which I can sell you. Absolutely.